Well, if you're going to apply for a job in government, the vetting process will now include integrity evaluations, credit history and criminal checks. The new rules were gazetted on Friday and some unions are concerned over the changes. The Public Servants Association of South Africa's Reuben Maleka joins us now for more on this. Reuben, you're among those who flagged concerns with some of these new checks. What exactly do you find problematic? Reuben, I suspect you may be muted. Can I ask you to unmute?
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Back to COVID
times. Thank you very much. Yes. The PSA is concerned mainly on the issue of, vetting related to the issue of going into the individual bank statements and bank information, particularly on a general note. In principle, if vetting has to happen, we are saying that we would support it if it goes to, especially in the top management, the DGs and the DGGs, and also if you have to deal with issue of saying how individuals handle their finances, it must be related to the job occupation. For a CFO to go under checking on how they handle their personal finances when they apply for a position of a CFO is relevant and it makes sense. But it would not make sense for a porter in a hospital to be checked how they handle their finances. That will be the waste of resources, and we don't believe that it will be relevant.
So am I right to say that you're saying on the issue especially of like people's handling of their finances, for example, you mentioned the example of a CFO, should the same apply to any other individual who works, let's say, for Treasury, where they handle money, or in any other government department where they're indeed involved in the handling of money? Would that be fair?
Look, it must be relevant to your job specification. Whether you're on the day-to-day basis, you'll be required to show that you can handle the finances. Then it would make sense to do the vetting related to how a person handles the finances. But in general, vetting should be reserved for top management positions such as the DGs and the DGGs. And we have said this before, even during the process of the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill. We did indicate that that process should be reserved for positions, and particularly where a person can be handling finances. But it will be a waste of money for the whole government to start saying that everybody and anybody that will be employed will have to go under vetting and also scrutinizing their financial background. We believe that that will be unfair and that would be the waste of resources.
Is there capacity, though, I wonder, within government for a department by department or job spec by job spec, I wonder, setting out of criteria for the sort of scrutiny that government wants to put in place, especially with the goal of building an ethical public service? Do you think that is possible without a one-size-all approach?
First of all, as I've stated, this is the time when the Public Service Commission becomes independent and its budget, its administration is run independently. Let me give examples. It must run like a public protector, the way that's been run. Because currently the Public Service Commission, the one that should be actually enforcing ethics, that must be enforcing professionalization in public service, is an entity of a department. So how do they be able to run and make sure that they can enforce professionalization, they can enforce ethics when they are a subordinate of a department of Public Service Administration? And in the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill, that is where it is coming in to say this body must be independent, must have teeth. Whatever a DG or anybody with authority in the public service, any transaction that they commit, they must be able to, their recommendations must not just be recommendations. They must be binding, they must be able to be implementable. That is the only way when we can see that the public service in general can have a body that looks after their conduct and ensure that there's professionalization in the public service. And that will happen once the Public Service Commission becomes independent.
You mentioned the Public Service Commission. Well, its chairperson, Sumato Dafigeni, said this: the kind of weaknesses that have been spotted, he says, in the past are dealt with where people are appointed on the basis of loyalty instead of competence, where people who've done wrong disappear from this province and reappear in another province. Do you think then what has now been put forward would help to deal with a scenario such as what Mr. Figeni had pointed out? Dr. Figeni, excuse me.
Absolutely. That's what we support as the PSA, to say that in the public service, and we're not, let me point another weak point that is happening in the public service, the issue of cater deployment. We are saying it's not wrong to have a cater deployment, but cater deployment must have with merit. And that's exactly where the problem is, where if somebody is appointed without merit, there are no consequences. There must be a process where a person is appointed without merit. Say, for instance, they require particular qualification and experience, and therefore suddenly somebody without those qualifications, merit, is appointed. Public Service Commission must be able to come in and say, look, we are aware of this appointment, and in terms of the powers that vested in us, we are saying this process must be reversed. And as a recommendation that the DG cannot ignore, they must at least implement, and if they don't implement, there must be reasonable reasons that are forwarded to the Commission on why they are not doing so. In so doing, it means we will not have managers or DG doing as they please to populate the public service with unqualified people that are not equally even having knowledge and skill to perform functions. Because what happens nowadays, and that has been what is happening in the public service, you find people said that no, is appointed through the ministry. Suddenly, that particular individual is a public servant, and how that person managed to get the position is questionable. And exactly what we have seen in the recent, over the weekend in the news about the pending, appointment of a DG by one of the departments. Those are the powers that we want the Public Service Commission to have, to say this appointment cannot proceed until we make sure that there's proper process and there's proper scrutiny in appointment of public servants. That is the only way to professionalize the public service.
Do you agree, though, that, Reuben, that politicians and political parties are, in fact, the greatest obstacle to the goal of the creation of a more professional and more ethical public service, based on what you've just said?
Look, obviously, there's an impact in terms of, and that is why in the Public Service Amendment, Public Service Commission Amendment Bill, and the draft document on professionalization of the public service, is that, and that is what we also welcome, because it also eliminates the political interference of saying DGs must no longer be on a 5-year contract. Because there's a notion and abuse of saying if you're on a 5-year contract, you are linked to the 5-year term of a politician, and instead of equal being an administrator, you are now have to be loyal to a politician to survive your 5 years. And instead of making sure, and that is what we appreciate, because the new amended process is now that DGs must at least minimum be appointed for a 10-year period. That will create stability, that will create professionalization, that will not create a situation where a DG is under pressure to just be a lapdog of a politician merely for the fact that they want to survive their 5-year term.
Reuben, Maleka, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.